Alright, so what I want to first do is show you that this is a Blue Line Bristol Board Smooth. I'm going to use a HB pencil, and I would normally go with more of a 2H. This is a 0.5, just mechanical. It's easier for me to focus on just hitting this little button versus resharpening. Sometimes I'll actually use a pencil holder and a different type of lead, but I want you to be able to see with the darker lead, and I want to be able to click through this as quickly as possible to show you as much of this in real time, hopefully, significant amount of it in real time anyways. So basically what I want to show you here is that the first thing you do is you take this 11 by 17 sheet that you see, and I've got it zoomed in a bit because it makes for a weird kind of, if I put the 11 by 17 in scale of the video, it gets very small. So I want you to be able to take this in and see. Obviously you start with the script. Now I'm not going to start with the script in this one because I pretty much know, or I do know what I want to see on this. It's my own book, so a lot of time I work visually first, not necessarily the best way to do it. I'm starting to segue into more drawing first, writing first, and then going into my drawing. But I want to be honest, this is pretty much the way I've produced multiple books for myself, or short stories and books. So I want to show you the way that I'm most used to working with, and not the transitional part that I'm doing now. But most of the time you're going to start with writing first. So in this case, what I want to see here is our hero is seeing the doctor, so to speak, and he's shown the alien for the first time on his back. So what happens is I start off with the panel. Most of the time you're going to start with an establishing shot, okay? But the establishing shot on this one's already been established in the previous pages, so we don't really need to do that. But each time you go to a new page, if it's a new setting, a change in the narrative where they're in a new area, you're going to start with an establishing shot. Ugh. A lot of times I'll write EST, on the page. That's just whatever. That's something I do. But anyways, just think of it as a big shot where it lets the reader know where they're at. Nice visuals. It can sometimes even be a splash page, but and it can even be a smaller panel. But generally, establishing shots are going to be larger, whether or not they're vertical or horizontal, whatever. But you want to give them a nice scope of where they're at. And then from there, you can segue from that into other panels that aren't necessarily as detailed. So a lot of headshots, close-ups, and speech bubbles. And also remember to always account for speech bubbles. Leave a good percentage of your page open and available for that. If you know where they're going to go, kind of draw them in, but always leave ample space on your page for that. Very big deal on that. It's at first we're drawing and we're all excited to be making these pages, and we just fill them up, and that's not really the right way to do it. So at any rate, so we got the hero. I'm going to take these nice little measurements here. I've got a 1/2 inch mark and half a page, forgive me. I'm not used to recording like this, so I may fumble through this a little bit, but hopefully the content is still good for you. So I'm going to just establish what size I want these panel borders. So for instance, the first shot, he's kind of, we see the doctor looking over, some digital, computer devices that's actually analyzing the alien on Blackstone's back. So what happens is I'll go with the shot here. I'll just lay in a basic mannequin of what I'm picturing. I'm kind of picturing that Blackstone's looking over his shoulder. He's removing his coat and showing the alien on his back that's kind of flailing around. So what I tend to do here is very loosely and energetically, hopefully, lay in the information. I try to avoid worrying about things being too concise at this point. It's definitely not about that. It's just about conveying the story and dropping in the major forms. I look at it like this, I'm going to really adjust this as I go throughout my process. So for me, it's not a matter of getting these roughs in to where they look impressive. A lot of times the only person that sees this stage is me anyways. Now, if I was working with a team and I had too much lead there, so it snapped off, I'm also very heavy-handed. So that's where actually a lighter lead, a harder lead, is going to be better in the beginning. But I figured since you need to be able to see these lines pretty clearly, a darker lead would be better. But like I said, generally I'll start off with a harder lead, which is lighter, and get a lot of this base information in place. It also helps to not muck up the page as much, because if you're working with darker, softer leads, you're going to be making a little bit more as you drag your hand through it and erase and things like that. So just something like this, just very gestural. He's got an arm kind of with his thumb pointed back at this alien. The alien's kind of moving around. He's got his coat down to about here, and he's removing that. We could probably use that to cover up the other arm. And just like that, pretty simple. And if I wanted to, I could get in the expression, maybe the one eye wider as he's looking back, the other one squinted. Try to get some expression in there. Maybe a open mouth because he's talking. So a lot of times it's nice when you make the character speaking, obviously, when there's going to be some word balloons there. And again, we have to think about where that word balloon's going to be. Maybe a couple of them, maybe there's some dialogue back and forth. Probably is, or there's going to be. And then over here, keep in mind too, just for borders, the darker line here is what's referred to as no man's land. So from this point over, you don't want anything. That's going to all be filled in. And from this point into this next little cut, this is usually page overlaps, I believe, but you still want to be leery of what goes into that next section. We'll call that about, is that 3/8? Or maybe a 1/2 inch, I don't know. But what the main thing is that if the information is coming out to this next little area, like again, this area I'm filling in, this is no man's land. So just the gutter or whatever, there's a couple ways to define it. But this part right here, and forgive me if I'm getting this terminology wrong since I've been working digitally so long, but this next part, you still want to be leery of what information you put there. So just be aware of that. To the very edges, make sure that if it's pertinent information or it's going to hurt the visual page layout, that nothing important goes in these areas. Definitely not out to here. It's going to get cut off entirely. So just be aware of that. These are called safe zones, and for a reason you want to stay inside of those. Okay, so with this next panel, I'm going to bring it in where it's nice and safe. Over to here, or I should say the previous panel. And I'm going to make this one a little bit shorter. So what happens is a lot of times I make these as big as I need them to be, and then I leave as much space as I get down to the bottom of the page, especially because I like to end a lot of pages on a larger shot that is maybe a little bit more of a cliffhanger to the next page. It's not always. You're not going to put a cliffhanger on the end of each page, but it's a nice kind of way to work, I think, because then what happens is you want to really think about the panels being exactly the size you need for whatever shot it's conveying. But at the same time, you more often than not will leave, have some leftover room, I guess, when you try to work small and accurate, and then you can save up for those big action shots. Now, really the pacing is something that you do from page to page to page. So you're going to rough out all of these, not just one page. So it's kind of hard to explain what I'm talking about without showing you a few pages in sequence and the way that I draw them. But just keep in mind, really panels should be as big as they need to convey the story. It's the same thing with writing. Does it propel the story forward? Is it beneficial? Is it just fluff? And sometimes you just have to say, well, it doesn't have meaning to the overall narrative. Where we're trying to take this story, so you trim the fat and you get it out of there. All right, so now this one, I just want the doctor kind of viewing. We're almost looking over his shoulder. So again, with some basic mannequin type work, nothing too extravagant here, or pretty to look at. But I'm just going to throw in some basic shapes. We're looking over his back. Kind of like one of those scenes where Batman's on his computers in the Bat Cave or whatever, but not so dark and ominous. In a sense, this is going to be more like just a techie, computer device that he uses to analyze the genetics of whatever he's studying. So he's like a geneticist that's trying to help Blackstone pretty much at gunpoint try to figure out what this thing is and if he can rid him of this funky back crawling beast thing. Yeah, trying not to get into the story too much because you got to buy the book for that. You're not gonna get it all here, folks. Sorry, I don't care. Anyways, So a bunch of screens, that's what these little boxes all stacked on top of each other are. I kind of figured like, I'll simplify it for now and then figure out what kind of design this is. Now, really, I already know because I've got pages already done that I'm just going to try to keep continuity and look at what's on the other pages and then redraw them. So all I really need is this basic, building block idea, something like that. Now, at this point, the camera angle is pretty, it's not much higher than their height level, so it's pretty boring. I should probably be moving around the camera angle. But what I want to do is just kind of get some roughs in here and show you the process. So now with the next portion, I want the doctor kind of in awe, basically. So he's analyzing some data. Blackstone's explaining what's going on. Maybe here we've got like a robotic arm that's coming in and getting ready to do a biopsy or some thing of whatever they call it in the future. Probably still call it a biopsy. And so they're just going to take a sample of it and analyze it further, and then so something in there. What's neat about adding these details that are closer, it immediately pushes information back. It makes it look like a more depthy scene. So always focus on your overlaps and be kind of strategic with them. And what'll happen is you'll generally get what appears to be a more detailed or well thought out scene because you have overlaps. You're not just drawing everything in such a flat kind of basic idea. So anyways, so now with this next panel, we're going to close up on the doctor's face. And let's see, we're going to go to about here. I want to do this close up and I want to pack some detail into here. And I'm probably coming off the page here. Let me adjust my camera real quick. I'm going to try to just scroll down the page as we go. So again, that I can keep this hopefully as large as possible so that you can see what's going on here. So with this one, I actually want to close up on his face, and I'm thinking, more of an angled kind of shot like this, and kind of a wide open expression, almost like a eureka we found at moment. Like he's like, holy cow, this thing is not what we thought it currently was. You know what I mean? So yeah, he's like, maybe small pupils. I don't know if that goes along with shock. I need to look that up. I'm always like having to double check my expressions, but it seems like to me that looks like a concept of shock. Maybe a low camera angle, so we're seeing up the nostrils a little bit. That's always fun. But again, it's more or less just moving this camera angle around so that it doesn't appear too boring. It's very easy to again keep that camera on a tripod or something in a sense in our mind's eye and our storytelling, and we don't want that. We want to zoom in and out. We want to move that camera around like it's on a think more like on a drone versus a tripod. Like when directors want to do this stuff, they have to spend big budgets to get these fancy shots. Probably used to be helicopters for these aerial shots and drones nowadays, but we're fortunate as artists. We don't have to spend all that money. We just have to improve our drawing ability and figure out how we can move our mind around the shot. But yeah, so what we're going to do is this zoomed up kind of view. Again, I want to really fight the urge to detail, but I do like these close-ups, so you can probably tell I'm wanting to have some fun in drawing. But right now it's about getting a rough concept in place. So okay, so he's zoomed up into the face. There's this shocking moment. Again, we have to be careful that we leave adequate space for some word balloons, and it looks like he's getting ready to divulge some pretty intense information. He's like shocked and like, oh boy, are you ready for the bad news or whatever? So there's that, and then he might be explaining, or he is explaining something that Blackstone's not particularly going to like. So as we shoot over this way, now keep in mind, this probably goes without saying, but let me make sure that I do explain it. And I'm going to have to scoot this page down to show you. Your panels for American comics are going to go from left to right and then top to bottom, but back to the left. So it's a backwards Z that you're working on here, okay? So boom, 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 boom. Sorry for the sound effects, but I always seem to convey things better with sound effects. And then So our next one's here, and you can do this even with the placement of your word balloons and the way the characters are looking. You know, you can do there's all these different ways. And forgive me, because I'm not as savvy in all this stuff. Probably lots of better artists to explain this and the way this works. But you can do this with the way that you're propelling your characters. I've even seen shots that are cool where they're fighting and they're punching each other into the next panel, which is just a fun, neat way to kind of do it. So we get over to here. Again, you know, now he's gotten the bad news. And, you know, Blackstone's a big, tough, mean guy. So what does he do? He just lashes out. Now, there's lots of ways we could do this. We could have him, you know, I mean, there's lots of ways to do every panel. And that's where it's so tough to really, you know, be an artist, because you do have so many options, and options create variables, variables create confusion. So, but let's say that for the sake of this one, he's just, you know, it's kind of a little bit of an upshot and a wide open mouth expression. You know, he's obviously screaming or grimacing or whatever, you know, just, you know, what the, hey, this sucks or whatever. Again, without saying that this is exactly what goes into the story. And I know people are probably just thinking, well, dude, couldn't you just tell us the story exactly, and then we'd know what your goal is? But again, since I'm more of a visual artist first, if I was working with a writer, it'd be different. And maybe, you know, we'll do an upcoming video or something where I take an actual script, you know, Marvel or DC script or something, and we work through a page together. It'd be a lot of fun. So I've been meaning to do that anyways. I want to find a good Spidey script. So if you guys know of any, just comment in the section below, and maybe we'll do that, because I like drawing Spider-Man, obviously. If you watch the channel, you know that. So he's you know, grimacing, screaming, whatever. Let me tilt this down a little bit more. Now, the other thing is this. You know, by itself, that's not a very impressive panel. It's just kind of like, you know, whatever. But something that you can do that's pretty easy to make something look more impressive, or a basic panel like this. Now, I do like this so far because I've left plenty of room for the speech bubble. You know, probably one of those little jagged lines like he's ticked, you know. And so that goes to the mouth there, you know, pointing at what he's saying or yelling. And the alien can be kind of flailing around, because what happens is, now that this thing's bonded to him, when he gets upset, this thing gets upset, you know. So it's like it's very reactionary to, you know, his emotion or whatever. So that needs to show in the way that I draw that creature on his back. But the other thing is this that I want to say is, whenever you're doing a panel like this, never underestimate what just simply putting the hand in the frame does for it. I always notice that whenever I'm looking at comics I love watching the hand gestures. Now I'm just going to be boring here and just throw in one or two clenched fists, just like that. But it immediately does a lot more for it. Hopefully you can see that, and obviously as we work through it, it'll look more impressive than that. But it just shows that extra level of emotion, you know, like when people talk with their hands, right? It's very much part of the way that we convey what we're feeling. So you got to get that in there, and it's so easy to do. Well, hands actually suck to draw, but what I'm saying is it's easy once you figure out the basic shapes of them. So now he's ticked at this information he's gotten, and you know, he doesn't know what to do with it. He's just, you know, kind of enraged, that's kind of the type of character he is anyways. So now from here, we're going to segue to the next panel. So let me get some of these kind of drawn in a little bit better here, because I like to usually incorporate a little bit of design to my panels as well. But be careful, that's a double-edged sword. Really, you want to focus on what's in the panel. As you get better, I've heard more professional artists, you know, that I admire say this, so I'm going to share that with you. Focus on what's in the panels, get that right, and then after you feel confident there, you do more decorative stuff with the exterior panel borders and all that. But don't jump the gun and put the cart before the horse, so to speak. Okay, so for this last one, again, what I was trying to allude to previously in the video here is that I like to leave a lot of space in case I have a dramatic panel, and generally, or a cliffhanger, I guess that's still dramatic, but dramatic panel at the end. So just like an establishing shot where you're trying to bring the viewer, reader into the narrative and show them where they're located in the storytelling, I like leaving a big panel at the end if I can, if I need it. Now, obviously, if it's more back and forth, it's a lot of little headshots and close-ups on a mouth or an eye or whatever. But for this one, I wanted this to be a dramatic kind of feeling. So I leave more space. And so what it is they become alerted that something's, there's a alarm going off. Okay, so just so you know some of the narrative, Blackstone has basically snuck into this place. That's why here he's removing a coat for a disguise. He snuck into this place and basically at gunpoint told this good doctor that he needs to help him, now. So at any rate, this alarm's going off. So now, he doesn't know if the doctor triggered something, and they're both kind of in shock here. So what I want now is a bit of an upshot. So what I like to do on shots like this is just establish a little bit of perspective. Some basic lines like that are all you really need to get started. I can figure out next if this is 2 and 3 point perspective, but it's basically an upshot whenever I do this little fanned out lines. That's pretty easy to do on digital or traditional, but all I want is this. I want to convey this sense of urgency so that like they're both kind of in shock, and I might even have it where I haven't decided yet, but I'm just going to start with something. So Blackstone's going to be on this side, and he actually needs to appear quite a bit larger because he's a lot bigger than the doctor here. So what happens is that we're going to be looking up at him. We're going to see the shock expression on their face. Maybe he's kind of still an open mouth pose, but a little bit more just grinded teeth now. And, like I said, I was kind of bouncing back between the idea that either he's just looking up and kind of, realizing what's going on, or I was going to have him looking over at the doctor like he's upset, like, hey, you must have did this. But I don't want to try to convey too much here in this one shot. I gotta let the storytelling, the words do some of the heavy lifting as well. So what I'll do here is just start with this, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't feel dynamic enough, then I can obviously change it. But what I want to do here is have the effect that we're looking slightly up at these characters. Again, I'm going to make sure to get some hand expressions in there. Like generally when you have a hand expression where it's just kind of open, it can look like, like shock or like, hey, what's up? What's going on? At least that's what I think when I see the hands open like that. That's actually a bad placement of it, but I'm just going to throw it in there for now. And I can adjust as I go. Again, this is just a rough layout. Now, another way to look at this is I'm trying to do these more in full scale on the page here, but generally I'll rough these out in thumbnail version on, I might have already did that with this, but I'll generally do that on some smaller sheets. Okay, so I actually have thumbnail paper, and I'll rough all this stuff out very small, generally about like this, the whole page, and work through these ideas. So in this case, I'm kind of jumping the gun on that, and I'm just showing you, like I've already got this idea going for how I want to see this page. But keep in mind, if you don't feel as comfortable doing that, and when you go to do that, you get it here and it's just not working out, and you're constantly erasing and redrawing just to get through this part, do not feel bad about that. I've actually already done 4 or 5 comic books, so I have a little bit of understanding of this stuff, but you don't need to hold yourself accountable to that. Like, you basically just say, okay, well, I'm just going to rough it out on my sketchbook until I really know what I want. And when I mean rough it out, I mean rough it out. Like, just let the pages and the sketches be very loose. It benefits you so much. Like, you don't need to have this beautiful little sketch of it to come here with it. But what you need to do is let the ideas flourish in that sketch. You need to let them be, you can convey a lot with a rough thumbnail. So just, let yourself sketch it out, try different camera angles, different poses, and work through it, but don't feel the need to refine that little sketch. You really don't have to. It's hard to explain without actually just going through it and doing it, but one of the things that helped me understand that is when I did storyboards, I was so amazed by not only how much I could convey to the people I was working with the rough stage of the storyboards, but how much their rough sketches influenced and helped me when they would send over thumbnails sometimes. I started requesting it. Not everybody felt comfortable sharing their wonderful sketches with me, but it's amazing what you can discern from even somebody who thinks they can't draw their bad sketch. It's it's actually pretty neat. Like it's more powerful than you think, and everybody starts to believe that we have to draw, you know, like the next Da Vinci to convey storytelling, and that's just not the case. There were times I got these really bad sketches, and I was pleasantly surprised at how well that helped the process along. So yeah, if you're ever working with a client, and don't be afraid to ask them to sketch. They'll probably give you the what? Well, I can't draw. Well, that's okay. Just try to convey to me what you want, and then I'll take it from there. Yeah, and the projects always seem to go better that way, but I don't know. But so what I mean is just really have fun with your rough sketches. Throw them down on the page, make adjustments. You start to develop this shorthand of things. Like for instance, if I want wrinkles in the suit here, I'm just putting these little scribbles under the armpit. It's not that I need these to be great, perfect overlapping folds like Bern Hogarth would do in his books or so. You know, I just need something there as a placeholder for the next stage. So think of it like a relay race. Each time you're passing the baton off to somebody else, in this case, it's going to be me passing it off to me. How sad is that? But it, you know, generally when you're working with a team of artists and, you know, writer and a editor and all that good stuff, then you're all kind of handing off to each other, and you know, so you want to think about that process. You want to emulate that process, even if you're just working by yourself, like me. No, I'm kidding. I actually prefer it, but you know, again, I want to be ready for working with other people, so I need to emulate that and you know, practice the way it would be if I worked with a, you know, group of other artists and creative professionals. So, you know, you see I'm just kind of placing some of this information, probably detailing a little too much, and really this doesn't feel like an upshot as much as it should, but I'll work on that. And the other way to do that, sometimes you can actually draw parts of a character. He's got like this headset thing on the side of his head, so, and the hair going up. You can actually draw it almost like this, but then once you start to fill in, you know, some of the background, and this would be, let's see, a 3-point perspective, I guess, with the way it's kind of leading up. So once you fill in some of this other techie gadgetry in the background, this stuff will all fall into the correct perspective. It sort of aids you in going back and revisiting what's here with the characters. So, you know, it's just don't be afraid to scribble some of that other information in the background. A lot of times when I'm struggling with getting a character positioned properly on the page and detailed properly, I'll work on the background for a little bit, and then that will help me see something in my my sketch with the rest. So let me kind of show you this one more time. I'll just adjust the camera here. I know it's a pretty crude way to do this, but hopefully it helps you. So here's our rough starting point of this page. And, you know, generally it probably wouldn't have taken this long, but I'm explaining it and all that fun stuff. But this gets us a step closer. Now, it doesn't mean I can't change something. This is very rough, very crude, but it gets us started. So stay tuned. I'll bring you another video where I take it to the next stage of the work and do some refinement. We'll talk about that. Maybe we'll detail a panel or two to finality, but I just want to give you an idea how this stuff works. So let me know what you think in the comments section below, as well as what else you'd like to see in the future in this channel. I appreciate your support. As always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and bye for now.